Pesachim Daf Tzadik Vav. First email is from Aaron Shalom from California. He's just stopping in to say hello, and he hopes that on Purim I dress up with Cafe Bustela costume that he got me, which is not going to happen. The second email is from Yehoshua Ludmir. He says it's been a year since the Golden Dove Musar Shmuz in Brachas, and he's looking forward for another good Musar. It's interesting that the day that I received this email, I said something over very similar to that concept. At any rate, Yishkoyach Yeshua Ludmir. When Klal Yisrael brings the Karban Pesach Betuma, most of Klal Yisrael's Tameh, they're permitted to bring it Betuma. And someone goes along and eats the Imurim, the parts that have to go onto the Mizbeach, is he chayiv kares or not? Is he chayiv kares as a typical person who eats kachim would be chayiv? And the answer is, since Imurim have the same halacha as meat, it says Asher Lashem, so he wouldn't be chayiv kares. The Gemara goes on to tell us that these Imurim, the kidneys and the fats that go on the Mizbeach, what did they do? The very first Karban Pesach in Mitzrayim, they didn't have a Mizbeach. So Abaye says perhaps they did something Shavisky, which means they just roasted it on a skewer. There's no actual Mizbeach. In fact, Rav Yosef says that the only Mizbeach that existed in the time of Mitzrayim is the doorpost, the top and the two sides, but that's it. Says the Mishnah, Pesach Mitzrayim was bought on the 10th of Nisan. Only that year was it bought on the 10th of Nisan, but in generations to come you don't have to buy it or designate it on the 10th of Nisan. Mitzrayim, the Pesach of Mitzrayim, and all Karbanis Pesach need something called a bikor. You have to observe the animal, see that it doesn't have a mum, but not the Pesach Sheni Karban and not any other Karban besides the Karban Tamid, which is Gzeir Shava, that teaches us that a Karban Tamid you have to observe for 4 days. Karban of Mitzrayim and all the other Karbanis, the Dairais, have to be eaten at night. And the fact that it says Hazeh comes to teach us what time of the night do we eat it till. We have Machlekes, Rebbe Lezer, Rebbe Kiva. Is it until Chatzos? Is it until the morning? The Torah says Va'avata, that the Avodah of the Karban Pesach, all the Karbanis Pesach are the same. And the Gemara tells us many halachas that we learn from this word Va'avata. In R Eli, somebody doesn't have a bris milah, he's a malvus, he's disgusting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he cannot eat a Karban Pesach, not the first generation, and never. And the ribu that we have by R Eli comes to teach us that he is mechuyev in matzo maror, although he's potter from Karban Pesach. A ben nechar, somebody went off the derech, he's a mummer. He doesn't eat a Karban Pesach l'shem shamayim. And a father who didn't do a bris milah for his son, they're both usher to eat a Karban Pesach forever in all generations. But the Torah says, a riboy, to tell us that they are permitted to eat truma and they're permitted to give over truma, the father that is, to his slaves. Etzem leyishburu bay is halacha in all karbanis Pesach. You're not allowed to break the bone. And the exclusion is that if a Karban Pesach is possible, there's no isser to break the bone. Atoich you can't eat the Karban Pesach raw. It's all generations. But we learn an interesting halacha that a R Eli, somebody doesn't have bris milah, could eat meiser sheni from this pasuk of Gzeir Shava. Says the Mishnah that in Mitzrayim they used agudas ezav, they used hysops, and they sprinkled the blood like that on the mashkoif, the top post, and the 2 door jambs. It's eaten b'chipazayin. The Karban Pesach of Mitzrayim was eaten really rushed, and it's only that generation that was eaten in a rush. The Karban Pesach is eaten at night, one night, and all Karbanis Pesach. But chametz on the first Pesach only applied to the first 24 hours, whereas in future generations, of course, applies to the entire Pesach. Rabbi Shua says, I heard a halacha, but I can't explain it. I heard that if somebody does a tmura on a Karban Pesach, tmura is, let's call the Karban Pesach animal A. He designates an animal for Karban Pesach, and then he finds a nicer animal. So he says animal B should be instead of animal A. That's the Issa Deraisa, and animal B takes on the halachas of animal A. Sometimes you shecht animal B, sometimes you don't. And I don't remember when. Says Rebbe Kiva, the Talmud, I'll explain. If animal A gets lost, and you designate animal C instead of animal A, and then you find animal A, so what halachically you should shecht animal A, but he doesn't. He shechs animal B instead, so animal A becomes dachui. Animal B, which you did tmur instead of animal A, takes on the halachas of animal A. And the halacha is yira. You don't shecht animal B. You let it graze until it falls a mum. You take the money, you buy a shlamim. However, if you shechted animal B, you were allowed to shecht animal B because you didn't find animal A yet. And only after the shechita you found animal A, and you did tmura, then the tmura could be brought as a carbon shlamim. And this machlokes in the Gemara, what exactly determines the time of a carbon pesach? What makes a carbon pesach? Is it chatzos hayoim, when you could start bringing a carbon pesach, or is the physical shechita of the carbon? Rabbi says it's the shechita, Rabbi Zeir says it's chatzos. What happens? We didn't discuss a case if you found animal A and you shechted animal A, and only afterwards you did tmura on animal B. So there's two lashonos in Rava. According to one lashon, since animal A is dachui, is pushed off, so animal B takes on that dchia, so you cannot bring it as a carbon, it grazes. Lashon 2 is, since animal A is pushed off so much, it can't even create a tmura. The tmura was never chal, and therefore the tmura, animal B, is a perfect shlamim. The Torah says kesev. What do we learn from the word kesev? That when it comes to carbon pesach, you take the tail of the sheep and you put it on the mizbeach. Im kesev, the word im, tells us that if it's already more than a year old, and shlamim, which come because of this carbon pesach, the halacha is, require all the halachas of a shlamim. You do smicha, you lean on it, you bring wine, you do tnuva chazav shaykh, you wave the chazav shaykh in different directions. And the pasuk v'im eis, all of a sudden there's 5 psukim that talk about a goat to teach us that when it comes to goat, you do not put the tail of the goat on the mizbeach. Have a wonderful day.